Okay, it's recording. All right, we're good to go. Hi, Katie. We'll see how that works out. Alrighty. Okay, so Tempietto, remember the Tholos? What does the Tempietto house? Where is the what is the Tempietto supposed to symbolize in its location?
St. Peter's crucifixion.
Very good. Where St. Peter was martyred. Thank you, Ange. Okay, staircase, right? Staircase is supposed to represent what?
A waterfall.
Waterfall. It's at a library. So what do you think the symbolism is here? Libraries generally mean what?
Quietness.
What's in libraries?
Look, reading.
What do books generally mean?
Bible.
Wow, we are so not thinking today. We weren't thinking yesterday either, but at least I had an excuse. All right. Come on, guys. What do books give people?
Knowledge.
Very good. So this waterfall is supposed to represent a flowing amount of...
Knowledge.
There you go. Thank you, Nina. Flowing knowledge. Exactly. All right. The Capitoline Hill. What is the sculpture here in the center of the Capitoline Hill?
Oh. Isn't that Marcus?
Yes, it's Marcus Aurelius. Exactly. Now, the Capitoline Hill, is it square or is it an unusual shape?
It's an unusual shape.
Right. It's got more of a kind of pentagon. I don't know.
Trapezoid.
Thank you, trapezoid. I'm really bad with geometry. And then the circle in the plaza.
Isn't it supposed to move?
That's right. It's an oval. Exactly. But from a distance, and when you're walking up the steps, it looks like it's all in proportion. So it's really playing with your view and your eyes. All right, St. Peter's. That's our next direction. St. Peter's, as we know, the original basilica was definitely under a lot of wear and tear from its early conception on through the Middle Ages. And then with the sack of Rome in 1520, it pretty much sustains, it just falls apart. So we have this commissioned by Pope Julius II saying we need to rebuild St. Peter's. And hence St. Peter's and the Vatican City is kind of born from there. And then Michelangelo is the one who essentially kind of gets most of the commissioned work and is the basic kind of architect of the construction. He keeps the same, there must be more, we're missing pictures. All right, anyway. We're missing pictures, but we'll worry about that later. Ultimately, what Michelangelo does is he takes Bramante's idea of a Greek cross, because a Greek cross is even on all sides, and constructs St. Peter's Basilica with a Greek cross plan in mind. Again, keeping with this idea of perfection. And with this kind of dome that sits over the very center of that. And it kind of mimics the dome of the Pantheon. But it's still changed a little bit more because initially it was to be wider, and then Michelangelo dies and someone has to kind of finish the project. So it's changed a little bit and then given this top area here. But very much like the dome constructed on the cathedral in the cathedral in Florence, that dome also is two. So it's one dome on the interior and then an exterior dome on the outside. So you can walk through the dome all the way to the top, very much like in Florence as well. And then it alternates windows. So window, no window, window, no window. It has this false implication of a window, but it alternates the windows with their design as well. So just like Brunelleschi, we have a double dome to feature on the top. And I am really dumbfounded as to where the rest of my slides went for that. So if I find them, I'll show them. All right, moving right along. See seems like so little to talk about in regards to St. Peter's, but nonetheless. All right, here we have the Farnese Palace in Rome. So again, think back to our palaces from the early Renaissance, the Medici Palace and the, give me a name, the Palazzo Rucella. Both of those were in Florence. We have here the Farnese Palace. Pretty much the major architect here is Antonio Segnalo, the younger. So there must have been an older one as well. Immediately, what do we notice about this particular palace in comparison to our palaces that we saw from the early Renaissance?
It's not, I don't know, never mind.
Come on, Nina, spit it out.
Oh, it reminds me of the ones with the rustic bottom and then the other layers.
Okay, so it kind of reminds, right, I mean, it's meant to kind of be very similar to our early Renaissance, recall that, but notice the rustic bottom. It's not really there, right? Where do we see the rustic appearance?
More top? Is that what you mean?
No, really, look at the corners.
The doorway.
And the doorway, right?
Oh.
So we have big stones here, middle-sized stones here, and then fine stones on top. So it keeps that order of 3 that we saw coming from our early Renaissance. More rustic stones, only these are found on the corners and over the doorway.
What's wrong with the date?
What's wrong with the, oh. Not exactly sure, but we need to get rid of that too, don't we? We also notice that each level has different types of windows. So we've seen that before from our early Renaissance. But in comparison to our early Renaissance works, this one has a very strong, sweeping, horizontal effect. More so than we saw coming from our early Renaissance architectural pieces. And then the kind of heavy cornice bottom, or rather top, the cornices are on top, kind of very decorative and very enlarged. If you look at kind of how angular it sweeps over the side here, that cornice definitely hangs over that building quite a bit. Like you could stand under the building and you wouldn't get wet because it's going to keep you from the rain. So that cornice, that top, the roof line extends very far out from the building. Anything else? Nothing? No takers? No takers? Thus endeth the architecture. All right, we're going to see if we can find more on, because I don't understand where my St. Peter's Basilica went, because that seems rather strange that we don't have more information on it. So let me check one thing. Did we talk about it again later? I don't think we did. No, we didn't. That's what I thought. All right. Well, we're going to fix the date because Nina said something about that. So that's done. And then let's go here. Wow. I need to look up and see. What chapter in the book are we on? Do you guys know? Because those chapters don't match the chapter I have in the book here. Are we on chapter 23 yet?
I'm not sure.
When was the last time you guys looked at the book, man? Seriously.
On Friday?
On Friday.
Yeah, I don't look at the chapters, I look at the names of the chapters.
All right, let me see. 20, 22. Okay, so we're in chapter 22. Gotta be. Let's see here. Thought so. Okay. So I can pull a picture of that up. All right, we can do a picture of, so you get an idea of what the layout of St. Peter's looks like, because that's always very helpful. So let's see here, we're gonna go copy. It's very weird. I would think that I would have more pictures. I'm not exactly sure why. Okay. Oh. There looks like there's lettering over here. What does that say? Oh, no.
What did it say?
Oh, it's the stuff from the whatchamacallits that I was making. Apparently, I don't know. It's not important. All right. I'm losing my mind. Losing my mind. Two and 2, 6. Okay. So initially, initially in regards to St. Peter's, Bramante was the initial designer. So he is unable to finish it. Perhaps death is the reason why. We probably could look more into that. So that's where essentially Michelangelo kind of comes into play. Plus, by this point, Michelangelo is heavily favored by Pope Julius II for the new work on this. So this is our floor plan here. So you can clearly see the element of symmetry in regards to the cross, right? That Greek cross. And if you remember, Bramante was very obsessed with perfection. He's the one he's the architect behind the Tempietto in Rome. Remember, that's the location where Peter is martyred. So he designs it. You can see that there's these circles everywhere, and then he works off of the Greek plan. Everything's even and fair, and I'm pretty sure like these are probably like a half or a fourth of the size of these. I'm sure there's like a mathematical breakdown of all this, but you can clearly see like the circles get directly smaller going outwards, side kind of chapels that are involved as well. And then Michelangelo is really the designer behind the facade, and the reason why we know that, one, because we just know it, but two, those large pilasters. So if you think back to the Campidoglio, which is what we looked at before we looked at this one, right? This is kind of like Michelangelo's kind of signature architectural style, these large, ginormous pilasters. And so he incorporates those onto the facade of Bramante's architecture of the Greek cross to kind of give it a decorative exterior. Make sense? Any questions? We're good? Awesome. Moving right along. We're going to so take our test on Friday. We're going to bust this sucker out. Okay. Do you want to save changes? I do, but I don't want to deal with you right now. So, last but not least, High Renaissance painting. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So while that pulls up High Renaissance painting, we're going to talk about a few things because it's going to recall and whatnot. All right. High Renaissance. Things to kind of note or remember. Our Northern Europeans kind of utilize the idea of a canvas through what painting medium? Northern Europeans.
Oh.
What medium of paint did they prefer to work in?
Oils.
Oils. And they go from doing oils on wood to oils on canvas. Canvas made it very portable, and that comes from our Northern Europeans. So it's no wonder, so eventually we start to see that here, but of course we're still in Italy. So during the High Renaissance, there's still a love for the frescoes. Those do not go away. So the canvas, however, becomes very popular in Venice primarily due to its very damp climate, and frescoes were not a good thing in damp climates. So the Venetians really appreciate this kind of new way of painting on a canvas. And wood would oftentimes warp under that dampness as well. So frescoes and wood they did it because everybody was doing it, but then the canvas comes along and it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. It made our lives so much more easy in regards to art. So that's what kind of the canvas is able to bring to Venice itself. The other thing that we had that comes out of the High Renaissance, there's a new technique called a sfumato, which is one of your vocabulary words. And Leonardo da Vinci really kind of is the father of this technique. What this does is it ultimately means he's rendering forms in a very kind of subtle way under a very kind of misty effect. We also have this utilization of chiaroscuro, which my artists know. What does chiaroscuro mean? Ms. Heinemann has even utilized this with you, Nina.
What?
Chiaroscuro. What does chiaroscuro mean? What does it mean, Ange?
You never told me that.
Oh my God. Vocab word. Look it up. All right. So we also have the utilization of chiaroscuro coming into play in regards to the paintings coming from our High Renaissance Italians. We also have this utilization of a glaze to give something a very kind of enameled appearance to it. Not glazes like we think of on pottery, but this kind of applied finish to the oil surfaces to really kind of give them a more polished sheen.
Do they put it on the entire thing or just certain areas?
On the entire thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we also talked briefly about at the beginning when we were kind of doing an overview, the idea of portrait paintings. How do portrait paintings change in the High Renaissance? We talked about this on Friday. So of course, Ashley won't know because she wasn't here. It's one of the big key changes from early to High Renaissance in regards to portrait painting.
Go beyond likeness.
Right, they go beyond likeness by giving the individuals what? Character. Very good. And we'll kind of look at what we mean by that. We'll look at one of the most well-known High Renaissance portraits known to man. So we're going to start off here with The Virgin of the Rocks by Leonardo da Vinci. We're keeping with that kind of triangular composition, right? Everything needs to have an element of balance. We have angels here with the Christ figures as well. Again, keeping that triangular composition. This also leads us to this idea of the sfumato. And what we're kind of getting at is where it kind of has this misty darkness that kind of waves over it, along with the utilization of chiaroscuro, which is that dramatic lighting that hits the figures, where it can kind of make them relatively dark on one side and then very well lit on the other. That's that chiaroscuro, that dramatic lighting. Remember it now?
Never heard that one.
Rembrandt!
She doesn't use that
She
word.
does too.
Well, then I've never heard it.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember hiding. That's what she tells us.
We also kind of have these kind of gestures that relate to one another, right? They seem to kind of tie in together. And it's rounded because at one point it sat in ultimately like a niche. We'll see, is it on canvas? Does it tell us if it's on canvas? No, oil on wood. So this would have been a panel that sat into a wall that probably was arched, right? Think of like those chapels with the arched ceilings. That's more than likely where this initially was located. Sketches. This one's here of the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne and the infant Saint John. So here, this is what we're talking about in giving kind of a sense of character to the figures. You can kind of almost see how it almost looks like, you know, they're two moms out together, their kids are playing. You know, two moms meeting at the park. I mean, very much this kind of idea of what mothers do. They don't sit at home by themselves. They get together with other moms and their kids play. And so that's what Da Vinci kind of has going on here. You can see the smile on Mary's face, right? And as Anne seems to be making conversation with her or perhaps laughing about something. So again, it's going beyond just kind of the stereotypical poses, but giving kind of a sense of life to the figures.
St. Anne looks like grotesque.
Incomplete.
Oh.
It's like an incomplete drawing.
Oh.
Yeah, so if you guys are wondering why St. Anne's looks kind of weird, right? We're dealing with like an incomplete drawing. This is one of like 1,000 incomplete works by Da Vinci. But he's working with charcoal on paper. So you would have like a folio of stuff. Embryo in the womb. Da Vinci really liked to take corpses and kind of study anatomy. So more than likely this is very much essentially a sketch. The embryo itself is perhaps not as exact. It looks kind of very more eggy than it would be, but you know, they're always tucked around like that inside, right? If you've ever seen kind of images of, you know, those sonograms and whatnot, how they're kind of curved around inside. You can see the umbilical cord here. So he could have very well been working with the corpse of a mother who was pregnant. So so he was kind of an avid studier of the anatomy. Because remember, the Renaissance, especially the High Renaissance, is all about doing what? What do we do to people in the High Renaissance?
Character.
Beyond that.
Like study them. The anatomy.
Right, but what do we do with them artistically? Starts with an H.
Hierarchy?
We haven't talked about hierarchy of scale in like forever.
Dude, that's
Because now it's like a given. Everything has hierarchy of scale. We don't even need to talk about it anymore. It's just kind of there. It's all about humanizing the individual, right? Yeah, she's like, yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Humanizing the individual, this philosophy of humanizing people. That's what comes about through this. So it's only right that you'll really have this study of the anatomy. Plus you have this birth of science. Science really goes very far during the Renaissance. A lot of things happen. We had the discovery of the New World. All of these, you know, this idea of that we aren't the center of the universe anymore, which, you know, it's kind of like, do we go with it? Do we not go with it? Kind of idea, right? That we revolved around the sun, that the sun didn't revolve around us. All these new kind of ideas, philosophical and scientific, are really coming about in the Renaissance. So what this does is it opens up that door to really getting at why we are who we are. Okay. The Last Supper by Da Vinci. It's not the first Last Supper we've seen, won't be the last, but everybody argues that it's the most interesting Last Supper. And we will not even go into the whole other crazy stuff that people think is in here. That isn't. We're going to stick with the facts. All right. So this particular Last Supper is located in Santa Maria delle Grazie. Grazie means thanks, which means that it's located in the dining hall that was connected to the particular church. And this one is located in Milan. Now, Milan's up north. It's in the northern west part of Italy. It kind of hits very close to the Alps. So there's this whole reason they're constantly trying to keep the Last Supper. They're constantly doing work on it because it's so moist. And what do we talk about in regards to frescoes and moisture? It's not good. So much so that while he was working on it, it was already falling apart. So kind of like that other idea of the bell tower in Pisa, right? The Campanella in Pisa, right? It was already tipping before they were even done building it. It just kind of was one of those things. It was already on its way out when he was trying to compose and paint it. Hi, Katie. So it's painted for a dining hall at the refectory or the abbey where the friars would eat. This isn't the first one we've seen. We saw one in the early Renaissance that dealt with that idea of perspective. So again, it really ties the relationship between the friars eating and the biblical meal itself. Leonardo worked on this in situ. What does in situ mean? On site. We haven't talked about that word in a long time. So it wasn't like he kind of worked away and then brought things in, because this was another kind of thing that a lot of artists started to do, is they would work on frescoes elsewhere and then bring them and kind of add the fresco onto the wall in sections and then kind of piece it together. In Leonardo's case with this particular Last Supper, it was done in situ completely from start to finish. And he was the only one who worked on it. Immediately we can kind of notice that there's definitely this idea of that linear perspective that we saw coming out of the early Renaissance. We have orthogonal lines that follow the ceiling and the floor, and they all point to Jesus. So Jesus himself is that perspective point. And I think we have, no, wow, what a time to not have lines, but you can see the blow up here. And all the lines kind of converge onto Christ himself. Apostles are grouped into threes. We'll go back out, we'll pan out so you can kind of get that idea. 3, 3, 3, and 3. Again, 3 is what?
Oh, it's the 3 Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Right. 3 is kind of one of those divine numbers. So he kind of borrows from the... Remy, your head's in the way, by the way. That's all right. Because I'm still recording for Katie. Hi, Katie.
I don't have time to take notes.
That's all right. No worries. We're recording. So again, keeping with that idea of 3 being that divine number, Remy, while you're here, since you're here early, go down to the library and see if Non needs help cleaning up.
Aye.
Thank you.
Just came by.
Hi. The only one who stands alone, of course, is Jesus. And we also see the utilization of 3 within the windows as well. 3 windows behind Christ. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, kind of keeping with that theme. In his particular working, he also experimented with kind of a combination of oils and temperas to better achieve that chiaroscuro that Da Vinci really liked to have, that dramatic lighting. And this is where we talked about how things started to kind of fall apart before he even finished, and that was another contributing factor. Outside of the moisture being an issue in Milan for this fresco, the combinations of materials that he used also were not so great. So he experimented on this, which is always great. We like to see when artists experiment. He's trying something new, but unfortunately it just does not work out for him. And the paint starts to peel off, and so it's constantly being restored. Like if you ever go and visit, usually like one portion of it's covered because they're busy restoring it. You can go back 3 years later and another portion, and you'll be like, this is always under like renovation, because they're desperately trying to keep it intact. And you have to also remember that like for years nobody took care of it either. I mean, this idea of restoring art is really only something new within the last kind of century or century and a half. So yeah, up until then there was no clean of anything. Things would get dirty due to smoke, get darker. We know that from the Sistine Chapel when it was finally cleaned, how bright, vibrant the colors were that nobody knew was there.
Why don't they put it behind glass?
Why don't they put it behind glass? Because it would mold. The moisture that's already in there would start to mold. Yeah, they tried that. That didn't work out well either. So yeah, they really just cannot seem to win with this particular piece.
And they can't move it, can they?
And they can't move it because it's on the wall. Yep.
That sucks.
Yeah. But what we have here taking place is the moment that Christ kind of declares that one of them will betray him. One of you shall betray me. So if you kind of look at some of the expressions on, their faces, this is kind of a cleaned version. You can see how it's been cleaned off. You can see that everybody here now is kind of in discussion mode. Who could it possibly be? Surely it is not I. That sort of kind of conversation is taking place here. But no one is really conversing with Christ himself either. They're all kind of conversing with one another. And there's this element of surprise, fear, anger, denial. It kind of hits up all of these emotions within each one of them as well. And then Judas is seen here. We can pick out Judas because he's the one that's kind of falling backwards, clutching the money bag that he got paid for betraying Christ. And we got to go out here. This is him here because you can't see the money bag. See how things get washed away. So we have that kind of element here. That's very different than how we've seen the Last Supper done before. If you think back to the other, the nunnery that have Judas sitting on the other side, you definitely kind of keep him. Everybody wants to keep Judas separate, and Leonardo da Vinci didn't really want to do that because Judas is kind of an example of how. Remember, it's this idea of humanizing. We all do these things. We all do bad deeds. And so we shouldn't be separated from the table because of that. Instead, we should be included in that table. We need to be lumped in there. He's kind of making Judas part of this dinner table because he was part of that dinner table. He's really trying to keep it true to the story as well, but yet making the viewer, or in this case, the friars that are eating in the table, kind of reminiscent of that. Any one of these individuals could have been Judas too. Like that's the thing. You kind of almost have to search to find him amongst this group. You just don't know who your Judas is. So Leonardo really kind of takes from our Northern Europeans in this idea of creating a sense of symbolism within the works. There's a deeper meaning behind what it is that we're looking at. And we'll stop there because we're going to go into the Mona Lisa next, which will give us the discussion of portraitures. All right, any questions? Comments? All right.